Get the power to do more with Sparefoot Marketplace. More reach, more leasing, more toward your bottom line. Storable helps operators do more with the most powerful technology in self-storage. Learn more at storable.com/do more.
So let's get started. My name is Matthew Beal. I'm a product marketing manager here at Storable, and I've been your host for the Navigating Uncertain Times webinar series, but I'm also going to be delivering today's presentation. And today's presentation is going to be a little bit different than previous weeks because today is the conclusion of our Navigating Uncertain Times webinar series. With that being said, we're really excited about what's next, and we're confident you will be too. So throughout today's presentation, we're going to be reviewing three main concepts. One is the market forces that operators have been facing before COVID-19 hit. Two is a review of the conversations that we've been having throughout the series to help you weather the storm, including some resources that you can revisit that content. And then lastly, we're going to end with a discussion on what's up next. So let's get started. So before COVID-19 hit, there were quite a few market forces that were already pushing operators to rethink how they were running their business. The first of those was the concept of excess supply. And so, for example, in the past 36 months, we've seen over 2,800 new facilities brought online across the United States. And that led to some market oversaturation. So because of that excess supply, we saw 40% of the top 100 markets pass the equilibrium tipping point and reach oversaturation, where supply exceeds demand. And while we hadn't seen the occupancy rates drop just yet, one thing was for sure is that all that available inventory had put major pressure on rents. And so, for example, the average national rents have declined for 10 by 10 units by 12% for climate-controlled units and 10% for non-climate-controlled units, respectively. And this downward pressure on rental rates goes directly to your net operating income, or NOI, which has left a lot of operators kind of scrambling to figure out where they can make up for those losses. And so before COVID-19 hit, these were some of the things we were already tracking to help the industry contextualize and respond to those forces. And in fact, we have already released 3 ebooks focused on providing operators with some clear, actionable information on how you can combat these market forces. So the first is this: get the most out of your marketing spend. This was focused on 4 digital marketing strategies that you can use to amplify your demand gen efforts while making sure that you're getting the most bang for your buck. Our second was overcoming declining net operating incomes. And this was focused on 2 strategies that operators can use to combat both increasing costs and declining revenue, which therefore offset those impacts to negative net operating income that the market was experiencing. And lastly, we had a book called Defend Your Storage Operation from Market Threats. And this was focused on 4 clear actions that operators can take to combat all those market forces and get a competitive edge. So the reason I bring these up today, we're not going to be going through these in detail, but in today's follow-up email, we are going to include some links to these so that you can download these ebooks if you want to read through them. They're still very relevant and an incredibly informative resource. And in fact, we're going to find out here momentarily, we think they're more relevant even than when we published them, not only 5 months ago, 6 months ago. But then along came COVID-19. And over the last few months, we've all had our world turned upside down by this health crisis. And almost overnight, folks were having to solve very unique problems they've never had to solve before, such as learning how to practice social distancing to keep both themselves and their loved ones safe. How they're going to wear masks when they do venture out into society, and washing your hands what feels like every 30 seconds. But after that urgency in our personal lives died down, operators start focusing on their businesses. And we were fortunate that in the self-storage industry, we were either deemed essential or not non-essential in all 50 states, meaning we can continue operating. But this did create a new set of challenges for us to solve. And operators across the nation were scrambling to create safe experiences for both their employees and customers. And there wasn't a playbook for this. It was really just like a once-in-a-lifetime event. So it's something we're all going through at the same time. And so we launched the Navigating Uncertain Times webinar series. And so next up, we want to kind of revisit those conversations. We want to walk you guys through what we've been discussing with various operators, vendors, and industry experts over the last couple of months so that we know kind of where we're going, where we came from. But first, a little bit of perspective. So as for why we started this series, we see it as our responsibility and privilege to provide whatever perspective and insight that we can in the midst of this crisis to help you navigate these uncertain times. And we believe that we were in a unique position to do so for the following reasons. One is the breadth of our client base. because we work with over half of the storage operators in the US, both large and small, we have a really broad view of how operators were addressing this crisis. And also our depth of industry expertise. So we have one of the largest teams in the storage industry, and it's made up of a number of folks that have decades of experience here. And so we have a really deep expertise in a number of operational areas that operators turned out will need to address as we navigate this crisis. And then lastly is the volume of resources. So we have some really unique relationships with some industry associations and partners, and that provides us with a vantage point to be able to see how the rest of the industry is interpreting and addressing this continuously evolving circumstances from their perspectives as well. So we've been continuing to have conversations with those folks. And it was these three factors that put Storable at the intersection of a whole lot of information. And that information yielded a depth of perspective that we felt was our responsibility to share. These webinars in particular were meant to serve as the primary vehicle to help operators solve the immediate business challenges presented by COVID-19. And we know you weren't each able to attend all of those conversations. And most of those conversations still have a very large amount of information in them that is incredibly relevant, even today after people are starting to solve these problems presented by it. So I want to spend some time reviewing that content from a high level. And as we go along, if any of these conversations sound interesting to you, we highly encourage you to visit blog.storable.com. And on there, not only do we have recordings of each of these presentations we're about to go through, but we also have some really fantastic articles written by our team here at Storable. So the first presentation, back on March 20th, just to give you an idea of kind of, I don't know, at times it feels like it's been forever, at times it feels like it was just a couple weeks ago. But a couple of months ago, we had our first presentation called Defending Your Storage Operations. And this was delivered by Cameron Berrigan. He's the Director of Product Marketing here at Storable. And this was our initial response to the crisis. And Cameron helped put the immediate signals from the health crisis into perspective, including financial metrics used to understand how the storage industry was going to be affected. And he also shared with us 4 key strategies that operators can use as a defensive playbook against this crisis. The following week, we had our first operator roundtable, and we heard from a lot of you guys that these were the most valuable conversations we had when we brought some operators to the table to discuss what they had been doing to navigate this crisis and come out the other side stronger. And so this first one was with Carrie Richard of Simply Self Storage, Bill Roberts of Staylock Storage, and Brad Mensley of 10 Federal. So these operators and industry leaders all discussed the immediate actions that they took in the wake of COVID-19, the strategies that they were putting in place for the long-term health of their business. And they were very much focused on the early challenges, such as creating a contactless tenant experience. This was back when everybody was still, very much scrambling to figure out those immediate problems that were being presented by the crisis. And a spoiler alert, they were way ahead of the curve, so still great conversations to go revisit. And then next up, we had Chuck Gordon, the CEO of Storable, who came on to deliver a state of the industry, if you will. And in this session, Chuck shared some trends that Storable has been monitoring in the industry, using some consumer data available from the Sparefoot marketplace. And there's some really good data in there you should check out. He also discussed the government response to the crisis as it relates to the storage industry, and some ways that operators can use technology to create a contactless tenant experience. That last bucket in particular is still incredibly relevant today, so I'd highly recommend you guys check that out if you're still looking to find ways to create a contactless tenant experience. The following week, we had another operator roundtable with Melissa Stiles of Storage Asset Management, Rahim Amir of Devon Storage, and Ann Ballard of the Universal Storage Group. And so this group of operators were there to discuss how you can maintain a personal connection with your customers while providing a contactless tenant experience. That's a common concern we hear a lot of the times around automation is how do you still make sure that people know your strongest asset, your employees that are working there in store. How do you still make sure that they're providing that personal touch? And so they had a really great conversation around that. They also discussed some simple ways to stay in front of your online shoppers and why it's more important than ever right now. And this is when we started having conversations about collections and delinquency. And we know this is still a hot button topic for the industry. So if you want to check out this conversation, it'll give you a good place to start. But we'll know that we'll continue to track that over time and continue to have some conversations in that space. Next up, we had a fireside chat with Tim Dietz of the SSA and Chuck Gordon, the CEO of Storable. So these two had an incredibly informative fireside chat. The conversation was focused around the impacts of the health crisis on the industry, but also in particular, what the SSA was doing to help operators through it. And if you guys haven't been following along what the SSA has been putting out, I'd highly recommend you do so. They have been an absolute beacon during this time. It's been fantastic stuff, and this was a fantastic conversation surrounding it. And they also discussed how operators across the country were dealing with the different legislation and quickly evolving economic situation. The next week, we had another operator roundtable with Tim Springer of Move It Storage and John Manus of Pinnacle Storage Properties. And these guys had a conversation on the trends that they were seeing across their portfolios and also across the industry, including how their businesses were already at an advantage when this outbreak began. And so they're also discussing, if they were already a step ahead and how they were at an advantage when it began. They started talking about what they saw as the next phases of challenges and how they're keeping their operations prepared for future challenges and growth. So another great conversation. This one is incredibly a very valuable one. Next was automation in the storage industry. This was delivered by myself, Matt Beal. And during this presentation, we discussed the role of automation in solving the immediate business challenges presented by COVID-19. We also discussed how operators should be thinking about integrating it into their portfolio going forward. A lot of people have been forced to adopt automation at a much more rapid clip than they expected as a result of COVID-19. And we talked about how what kind of various solutions were available today to help those operators go ahead and create that contactless experience, as well as kind of how to think about it coming out of the crisis as well. We then had our first vendor roundtable, and this was on the topic of automation in the industry. We had Phil Murphy of Call Potential, Robert Sheedy of OpenTech Alliance, and Warren Lieberman of Veritech Solutions. And so we continued that conversation with three experts on automation in the industry as they shared the ways that they've been seeing automation resolve issues for operators, again, both during the crisis, but also on the other end of it. And they shared their unique vantage points in doing so. And so they gave us some unique perspective on how folks will be using automation going forward to meet the shifting needs of consumers. Because spoiler alert, it's not going away anytime soon. And then the next week, we had Joe Sapphire, the CEO of Life Storage, join Chuck Gordon, CEO of Storable, for another fireside chat. And these two sat down to discuss how Joe and his staff have been adjusting to working during the pandemic. They also spent a significant amount of time discussing the importance of online move-ins right now. Joe and his team were significantly ahead of curve on that, and he provides a lot of really good insight into how to integrate online move-ins into your technology portfolio. And he also gave some insight into what he believes the next unique challenges will be for the storage industry. So highly recommend checking that one out. And then lastly, last week, we had another operator roundtable, our final one of the series, with Jay Fulcher of Morningstar Properties, Calvin Bird of Bird's Mini Storage, and Jay Sheminsky of All Storage. And this conversation was heavily focused on the long-term strategies that these industry experts are using to weather the storm and come out stronger on the other side. They also had some conversations around what they see as the next set of challenges that they're expecting as a result of the health crisis, and how they're focused on keeping their internal team safe and happy, and how they're evolving marketing strategies. So the natural question, though, is what's next? So we've heard loud and clear from operators that this series has been instrumental in their response to the crisis. And so we want to thank you guys for attending and contributing, because the reality is your guys' information, your guys' conversations with us has been what has informed our response to this crisis. And we want to continue providing you with the resources that you're going to be needing to be successful going forward. And so we've been continuing those conversations with our Storable clients in particular on what this might look like. And in those conversations, we've heard the three following things. First is the shock and adrenaline of the health crisis has mostly worn off. Folks have either already solved most of the immediate business challenges presented by it, or they know what they need to do to get there. But we're not out of the woods just yet. At the time of this writing, there's 38.6 million people in the US that have filed for unemployment. That's a huge, staggering number. And we're starting to see the longer term impacts that this could have on our economy. And even if the storage industry is considered essential, which it is so far, the income of our tenants is likely going to have a lagging impact on us. And we're confident that we are still going to get a few other COVID-related curveballs here and there, and we'll continue to help you navigate those. But frankly, it's time to kind of settle in for the long haul. And speaking of the long haul, remember those market forces we just discussed before COVID-19? Unfortunately, those are only going to be amplified by this health crisis. So over the coming months, we're likely going to experience reduced consumer demand, increased delinquency rates, which are only going to further drive down your net operating income. And so what's an operator to do? Introducing the 4 operator imperatives. So we are very excited to announce this next chapter of our webinar series, and we've titled it the 4 operator imperatives. And what we mean by that is we're going to be having discussions around the various macro trends that are facing operators today in the industry, and how you can utilize these 4 key concepts to position your business to thrive during the crisis, but also beyond. We think it's really important right now that we make a shift away from the reactive and the defensive COVID-19 response to a more offensive footing, focused on coming out of this the health crisis with a competitive edge. The actions you take today will set you up for success in the future. And so we want to share with you our objectives for that next chapter. First and foremost, and I cannot stress this enough, we want to hear from you. We're going to continue to find ways to have conversations with each of you. One great way to do that is via this webinar, via the Q&A, via the chat, but also via email. And we're going to continue to have those conversations early and often. And far and away, it's so much more important to us than anything else that you guys find these conversations valuable. So please keep that feedback coming. And then second is we want to continue bringing in those prominent voices from all over the industry. We're going to continue to host conversations with owners, operators, industry professionals, subject matter experts, vendors, etc., for conversations on each of the topics within these operator imperatives. And then lastly, as I mentioned before, this next chapter is focused on helping you prepare for long-term success and stability. So these conversations are going to be focused on clear, direct actions you can take to get out the most out of your marketing and operations, but also to defend against any upcoming threats. One common thread you heard throughout those webinar presentations, a lot of those savviest operators, they were taking actions well before these threats ever came to them. And so we're going to be walking you guys through how you can prepare and be successful in the same way so that if things come knocking your way, you're already prepared to combat those. And then if we do have any other curveballs that COVID-19 sends our way, or things like we mentioned, collections and delinquency continues to be a conversation, auctions, liens, we will continue to be able to support you guys in those as well. So what are these 4 operator imperatives? Each of these were distilled from countless conversations we've been having with our clients here at Storable, frankly, over the last year or so. These are not just COVID-19 conversations. These have been happening for a long time. And these are at the core of how our savviest operators are approaching both their operations and marketing sides of their business and defending themselves against upcoming threats. So let's take a quick peek at each of them, but keeping in mind that in 2 weeks, we're going to be doing a much deeper dive on these. Today, I just want to kind of scratch the surface level. First is this concept of optimizing your marketing spend. So this imperative is all about identifying the most effective marketing vehicles that you can possibly use. We're going to be discussing all the sources of marketing, including some you don't even need to pay for, to make sure that you're getting the most bang for your buck. 2 is rethinking the tenant experience. And so we've seen that before COVID-19, there was an increasing shift to digital channels for interaction in terms of consumer preference, whether it was paying bills, checking records, online move-ins, etc. But with COVID-19, obviously, we've seen an acceleration in that space. And so we're going to be discussing how you can utilize a combination of technology, process, and your people to meet the evolving needs of your customers. Third is simplify and automate processes. So this one is all about 3 main concepts. 1, how do you get the most from your people? 2, how do you make their lives easier? And 3, how do you give them more time back in their day so that they can focus on providing value to your business in other ways, such as working with your customers? So we're going to be discussing a concept of practical automation, which we also discussed in our automation webinar a few weeks ago, and how we believe that not all facilities are going to be fully automated tomorrow. We think that's unrealistic. But there is this middle ground where we believe most operators are going to be spending their time. And we've seen COVID-19 kind of accelerate those trends and force a lot of people to adopt some of these automated processes and technologies. And so we'll continue those conversations, and we'll discuss how to get to that middle ground and find that right balance of automation and people-powered processes. And lastly is amplifying operating revenue. So, and this is one that in particular, each operator is going to need to evaluate for themselves. How are you pricing vacant units? What about your occupied ones? How is the rest of your market handling this? Are you looking into ancillary revenue streams that make sense for your business? We're going to be discussing all of those concepts and more over the coming weeks to help you create a tailored solution that makes the most sense for your business. And so over time, like I mentioned before, we're going to be breaking down each of these imperatives to give you clear, actionable steps that you can take to position your business for success. So I want to dive in real quick and just show you kind of what is up and coming over the next couple of weeks. So as I mentioned before, today officially marks the conclusion of the Navigating Uncertain Times series. But going forward, we're going to be hosting these webinars every other week as opposed to weekly to provide you with the highest quality experience and just really ensure that they're more informative than ever. We're going to lean heavier into bringing other people from around the industry into these conversations, and this just takes a little bit more time. So we're going to go to bi-weekly so that we can make sure it's the most valuable experience possible for you. And so in 2 weeks, on June 12th, we're going to have our official launch of the 4 operator imperatives. And we're excited to announce that Corey Sylvester of the Radius Plus team is going to be joining us. And that's going to be on a conversation on the market forces that are driving the needs for these imperatives, kind of laying the groundwork for why we should care about these 4. And we're also going to dive deeper into each of those 4 imperatives so that you have context for the various conversations we'll be hosting over the coming weeks. 2 weeks after that, on June 26th, we're going to kick off our first in-depth conversation on the imperatives, and we're going to start with optimizing your marketing spend. This is a conversation we know a lot of folks in the industry are already having right now and trying to address. We're trying to figure out how we can fill those vacant units, and so we're going to talk about how we can do that in the most effective way and get you the most bang for your buck. And we're going to have a lot more to share on this topic in particular during our next webinar on the 12th, so stay tuned for that, and we will walk you through kind of in depth what we'll be discussing on the 26th. And so as for takeaways for today's presentation, if you take one thing away, it's really that Storable continues to be laser focused on how we can help you operate your business optimally. This is incredibly important to us. We see ourselves as partners to you guys, and we want to continue to do that. So as I mentioned before, please keep those conversations coming, keep those questions coming, keep those emails coming. We want to make sure that this continues to be a valuable experience for you. And then also is that, frankly, we see it as our privilege, and I want to accent that word privilege. It's our privilege and responsibility to utilize our platform to continue providing these insights to you. That's not lost on us, and we very much appreciate you guys being good partners in this as well. And then specifically over the next couple of months, our focus is going to be transitioning away from that reactive response to COVID-19 and instead becoming proactive and trying to find an offensive footing, so that you can gain a competitive edge, not only throughout the remainder of this crisis, but more importantly, even after it, right? How do you continue to stay 2 steps ahead of your competition? And so that's where these conversations are going to be going moving forward. But with that being said, I'm sure there's a lot to take in from all of you guys, and you guys probably have a lot of questions. So I do want to transition into kind of our open Q&A portion of today's webinar. So Alex, if you don't mind jumping back on the line, I'm curious, what kind of questions did we get today?
All right. Thanks, Matt. Can you confirm that you can hear me okay?
I can.
Awesome. Well, first off, if you do have questions, please leverage the Q&A feature on your GoToWebinar panel. We have gotten a couple of questions come in so far, Matt. The primary question we've got is, can you tell us where we can find the recordings of these past sessions?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place to get the recordings is we have them all stored on blog.storable.com. So if you go there, one is you'll see each of these conversations marked both by topic and by date. So if you just click on the article, there's an embedded YouTube video right there. Just click play and you can watch them from there. But in addition to that, I would just flag that there's also been a lot of really, really great, COVID-19 health crisis, but also some other related conversations and articles and resources that you can find on there as well. So I'd highly recommend you go check that out. It's definitely the best place to stay up to date on industry info.
Awesome. You also referenced some ebooks at the beginning of the session. Can you tell folks how they can get their hands on those?
Yeah, so those we are going to include in our follow-up email today. So within the next few hours, if you keep an eye on an email from Storable, we're going to have some links to the ebook so that you can check those out. But we'll also have some links for some content we'll be discussing here in a moment for Storable clients. So we'll always include that in the follow-up comms for you guys on the day of.
Wonderful. Another common question that we've got is, how can I register for the next series?
Yep, so the good news is just by you guys attending today, you are already registered for the ongoing series. So this has been, when you register for each individual webinar, you're actually registering for the ongoing series. And so what I mean by that is We're going to be moving to bi-weekly every other week going forward, the next one on the 12th. And so you guys will automatically be receiving follow-up emails because you registered for this one on how you can log in and view those as well. So as simple as that. You guys are already good to go.
Awesome. Here's another really good question that's come in. What do you think is Storable's biggest learning throughout this series?
That is a good one. So one is I would point to the takeaways slide that we just went through. So this is really a distillation of a lot of the conversations that we've been having here at Storable. But what I would say is, in addition to these concepts that we talked about, me personally, I've really appreciated seeing just how resilient the industry has been throughout this crisis. I've been working in the industry for about 4 years, which I recognize is actually not a long amount of time for a lot of people. This industry has folks that have been in it for 20, 30 years, and I'm constantly just kind of inspired by seeing people rally around these causes. So, this industry has always treated each other kind of like a family, and we've loved to see the operators, the industry leaders, the vendors, the experts kind of come and rally around this cause. And you saw just how many folks we had on our various operator roundtables and our vendor roundtables. And it's been really fantastic that those people have made time to come and support each and every one of you guys and to share their perspective and kind of loan their expertise out. And so I know we've heard from you guys that you've also appreciated hearing from one another. And so again, I just want to reiterate that is something that we want to double down on. And we want to continue bringing those voices to these platforms so that you guys can hear from one another how you're solving various problems or preparing for challenges in the future.
Awesome. It looks like we probably have time for one more question. And Matt, this one just popped in and says, I'm pretty new to being a Storable customer. You've talked a lot about SpareFoot on these webinars. How do I use it, and what do I need to do to sign up?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you send an email to info@storable.com, that's probably going to be your fastest way. But also, just because since you asked this question, I'll actually personally reach out to you after this webinar and we'll get you set up. But for those folks that have a similar question, info@storable.com is a great way. So by sending in there, if you guys have any questions about our various products and services and how you can, use those, adopt those, that's a great email to start, and they can give you guys some starting points and some resources and have a conversation with you about what makes sense for you and your business. Very good. Good to go, Alex?
I think so.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So before I let you guys go today, one last, just before we wrap up, I did want to go over a couple of recent exciting developments specifically for the Storable clients out there. So given the importance of automation, especially in the wake of the COVID-19 health crisis, we've been focused on giving our customers the tools that they need to succeed. And so, about a month ago, we released fully integrated contactless move-in capabilities across our platform. And so this is really exciting stuff. In particular, we fast-tracked this release to make sure that you guys have the tools that you need to be successful for your business, again, both now during this crisis, but also well into the future. And these new innovations stretch across the Storable platform, and they fall into three main categories. One is contactless move-in badging on SpareFoot. And this is a badge on your listing that allows you to demonstrate to your prospective tenants that are shopping for storage that you provide a contactless move-in experience. And as you might imagine, this is incredibly valuable right now. A stat that we shared a couple weeks ago is that facilities that have badged for contactless move-in and show that to their prospective tenants have been receiving 10% higher reservation rate than before they had indicated that badge. So I would highly encourage you check that one out. And then number two is online move-ins that are directly integrated into the SpareFoot reservation flow. And so the other one is SMS and email online move-ins, which are kind of one of, there are two pairs there. And you can provide SMS or email move-ins either through the SiteLink or storage management software. But most exciting is that each of these capabilities are available to you at no additional cost for our customers. And so if you want to learn about how to enable those features, we're also going to include some articles, Help Center articles for you in the follow-up email today, in addition to the ebooks and everything else we mentioned. So we'll be sending that out within the next few hours. But that concludes today's webinar. So if you guys do have any questions that come up throughout the week, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at webinars@storable.com. And then to all of you guys out there, just stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks for our launch of the 4 Operator Imperatives webinar series. So thanks for attending, and hope you guys have a great day.